Hello everyone and welcome to a slightly unusual video, at least for my channel. I realized the other day that I've actually been making classics reviews since 2018 and it is 2022 now, so time really does fly, doesn't it? So I wanted to make this video as a way to revisit my old review videos and make some commentary on them. This is also for new viewers to get some recommendations for classic books without getting spoiled. We will also be ranking all of the books I've read on the channel, as the title states, but it's all in good fun. The rankings are based on my opinion alone. You are of course free to disagree. We never monopolize opinions on this channel. So don't forget to make yourself a nice cup of tea or any other beverage of your choice, and let's get into it. Let's begin by presenting our tier list. We have 5 different tiers, and starting at the top we have the Pamela tier. Books that go here are my absolute favorites. The second best is the Made Me Cry tier. To clarify, I can cry just as much for sad endings as I do for happy endings. I'm just a big crybaby. So me placing something in the Made Me Cry tier is not considered a spoiler, just so you know. But yeah, so books that are good enough to make me cry, but I wouldn't go as far as to call them favorites. Next, we have the Good Read tier, which is probably the biggest category. Books that I enjoyed, simply put. Then we have the 4th tier, Made Me Bored. Again, pretty self-explanatory. And finally, we have the Made Me Angry tier. And yes, there will be books placed in this one. And yeah, below the tier list, you see all the books that we will be placing. If you are curious about a particular book, the chapters below will show you where to go. So now that we've got that out of the way, let's begin. First off, we have The Lady's Paradise by Émile Zola from 1883. This might actually be the only French author that I've covered on my channel. Anyway, oddly enough, this was the first classics review I made, which was posted on October 18th, 2018. The format is quite different from how it is today. I remember I didn't even have a proper script for this video, just a few notes, so it's really all over the place. I also remember not really liking the book. I found it difficult to connect with the literary style. It's called naturalism or realism, when you basically take all form of romanticism and throw it out the window. I just found it really grim and difficult to get through, so we will place this in the Made Me Bored tier. No hard feelings. Next up, we have my most popular video to date, Emma by Jane Austen from 1816. I posted this video on January 10th, 2019. This was such a wild card. It was the longest video I had yet to make, sitting at 46 minutes 28 seconds, and it took me nearly 3 hours to film. I was so exhausted afterwards. I had about 100 subscribers then, if not less, so I didn't think anyone was really going to watch it, except for, you know, my mum having it on in the background while she's doing housework. It's usually how it goes. But I put so much love into this video. I wanted to do this book justice, so I put no restrictions on myself when writing the script. And to see the video perform well is of course a huge boost. It makes it worth all the work, in my opinion. As for the book itself, it's one of my favorites. It's so charming and entertaining, while also being very clever and witty. I would definitely recommend it to anyone looking for a good starting off point in regards to the classics, although it is still quite long, just bear that in mind. So yeah, Emma definitely belongs in the Pamela tier. The next book is The Age of Innocence by Edith Wharton from 1920. And I posted this video on February 21st, 2019. I continued with the format from my Emma video here, which of course went on to become my standard video format. Please excuse the fact that I somehow got hold of the ugliest book cover ever known to man. Well, I guess that's what happens when you prioritize online outlets over ordering a more expensive edition. But still, it really is horrendous. I remember really enjoying the book though, all the way from the first page. The writing style was very quirky and I don't know, it just fit my taste really perfectly. Overall, a very good bedtime read, would definitely recommend. And I did actually full on sob at the end of this, so it goes into the made me cry tier. Don't let that deter you from reading it though, it was really good. I just want to take a moment to remind you that if you enjoy my content, then please like the video and subscribe to the channel, as it really helps me out with the algorithm. Being a small niche channel, I do appreciate every like, comment and such that I get, so thank you very much in advance. Next up, we have The Secret Garden by Frances Hodgson Burnett from 1911. And I posted this video on April 4th, 2019. This one is actually slightly different from the others, as I believe this is the only time where I talk about the author's life in the beginning of the video. I love learning about the lives of authors, especially female authors back in the day when being a female author was quite rare. So I had this idea to include a segment of this at the start of every new video, but I think I realized that this would add a lot more extra work and fact-checking, as well as add to the video length, which I was already struggling to keep short enough for one filming session. Yeah, I think that's why I abandoned that. As for the book, I thought it was quite lovely. While it is more on the children's book side of the spectrum, it handles some very heavy topics, but it does so in a gentle sort of way. It's difficult to describe, but I found this book a rather unique reading experience, and it's pretty short, so if anyone is curious, it won't take you long to get through it. I would put this in the good read tier, plain and simple. Ooh, next up is J.R.R. by Charlotte Brontë from 1847. And this was posted on May 23rd, 2019. It's another long one at 47 minutes, 26 seconds. This was a fairly long book though. It took me a while to read it, I believe. And I wore my hair up for this one. For some reason, whenever I choose to wear my hair up, I always end up regretting it. I just don't like how it looks post-filming. That's just me being silly, I guess. Anyway, this is that sort of book that becomes better after you've finished it and you've let it sort of digest in your brain for a while. Because I remember finding it rather dense as I was reading it, and it can easily feel longer than it is because a big part of the beginning takes place in Jane Eyre's childhood, and also a lot of things happen in it in general. It is a classic for a reason though, and definitely worth a read, I would say, at least once you've become used to reading somewhat older books. I will place this in the good read tier. Next up we have Wuthering Heights by Emily Brontë, also from 1847. I didn't actually notice that before, that two sisters both published what will be known as famous classics in the same year. That's pretty neat. This might be my most controversial video yet, but I really didn't like this book. I even called it a hot mess, which is quite bold for me. I always try to find something good about the books I read, mostly because I don't like too much negativity, but this one was just too frustrating. It really made no sense to me. I say controversial because I got quite a few comments on the video trying their best to educate me on how to understand this novel, which is fine. Again, I always appreciate anyone who takes the time to watch and comment on my videos, even if they don't agree with me. I tried my best to understand their viewpoint, but sadly, despite these explanations, my opinion remains unchanged. Therefore, this goes into the made me angry tier. Ooh, next up we have Pamela, or Virtue Rewarded by Samuel Richardson from 1740, making it the oldest book on my channel. To be fair, it is generally considered one of the first English novels and the first ever bestseller. But more importantly, why did I wear this top? I really dislike how it looks. I remember it being an impulse purchase. You should never buy anything on impulse, unless it's books. Number one life advice from me. I read this as a kind of curiosity thing, but it was so difficult to get through. The book is written in the form of diary entries and letters, rather than a traditional narrative, which makes it a bit of an acquired taste. And it's also quite long, so imagine over 500 pages of just letters and diary entries without any chapter breaks or anything. Even though the content itself had its own problems, I think that was my main issue. I like structure. I like structure in my life, in my writing, and in my reading. Structure makes me feel good. I put this one in the made me bored tier for reasons already made clear. What do we have next? Pride and Prejudice by the amazing Jane Austen from 1813. I waited all the way to 2020 to make a video on this one. I knew it would be a long one, but I was also scared that I would somehow fail to do it justice. But in the end, I'm really happy with how it turned out. I included illustrations in this one for the first time, and I really think it made it so much easier for viewers to visualize the story. This whole video is basically just a love letter to Pride and Prejudice. I mean, it's my favorite book. I've loved it since the first time I read it in my teens. There's not much else I can say really. It's Pemberley tier all the way. Now, we finally get to something a little bit darker. The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde from 1890. This was quite refreshing for me. I had been reading classic romances for a good while, so I thoroughly enjoyed Dorian Gray. There's this mystical, almost supernatural element to it, which I really love, and of course it does delve into some very dark territory. I think most people today have at some point heard or read a quote from Oscar Wilde. He was such a clever writer, and as I was reading, I did highlight a lot of quotes. I would recommend this to anyone, really, especially to people who want to get into classics but find them a bit intimidating or are afraid to get bored. This book is fairly short and fast-paced, so there isn't that much room for boredom, at least not from what I remember. We will put this in the good read tier. Moving on now to something a bit more controversial. This is the one review I've made where I didn't actually finish the book. The Sheik by Hall from 1919. I would definitely not recommend this book, especially not to people who are survivors of SA, as we call it on YouTube. It's not that super graphic though, so if you can handle that sort of thing and have a weird curiosity about it, be my guest, but don't say I didn't warn you. So yeah, this video is on the shorter end, but I still went on to look up the remainder of the book, and I did read the actual ending just to make sure I didn't miss any important details. Like, what if the main character woke up and it was all just a really bad dream? It wouldn't make it into a better book, but it would make it a completely different story. I find it a real shame though, as I did enjoy the first couple of chapters where we get to know the main character before her kidnapping. I suppose that's what makes it worse, because it could have been a really good story if it wasn't for the SA part of it and her going on to fall in love with her perpetrator. So, unsurprisingly, this book goes into the made me angry tier. Next, we have the Lord of the Rings trilogy by J.R.R. Tolkien, first published in 1954. I did read these back to back on my channel, so I will talk about them together as one. As I've pointed out before, I got into these books pretty biased, as I was already a huge fan of the Peter Jackson films. So naturally, I very much enjoyed seeing the full story unfold. It was overall a fun experience. There are, however, some places where Tolkien gets a little too excited and thus creates massive info dumps. Whenever that happened, I did feel like it dragged on a bit. That's why The Two Towers ended up being my favorite of the three, as I felt it was the most fast-paced out of all of them. Not that it has to be fast-paced, but you know what I mean. Although The Return of the King did make me cry. But I don't know if that counts, as I was thinking of those moments in the film that always makes me cry, and thus the book made me cry too. But I've decided to put these in the good read tier, but like at the very top, bordering made me cry. Next up we have Persuasion by Jane Austen from 1817. This was not a favorite of mine when it comes to Jane Austen, and I know a lot of people adore this book, so I'm trying to be respectful of that, while also being honest about my opinion. So out of all of the Jane Austen heroines, I actually identify the most with Anne Elliot. She is an overthinker and an introvert, like yours truly, and I found her really frustrating for that particular reason. That is really the best way I can describe it. She reminded me of my own unwanted personality traits. Apart from that, I also thought the book was a bit too short. Events are told through narration most of the time, rather than shown through actual scenes, which makes the book feel a bit rushed and unfinished, at least for me. Again, I completely respect if this is your favorite. That is entirely subjective. So I struggled a bit in deciding where this one goes. It's not a bad book, but I generally didn't enjoy reading it very much. So I would place it kind of in the middle between good read and made me bored tier. Then we have Little Women by Louisa May Alcott from 1868. At this point in my video making development, I had started making some aesthetic B-roll to put in the beginning of the video, and I really loved that. I have a soft spot for aesthetics in general, so that is definitely something I want to continue learning more about. But yeah, this reading experience was a bit of a mishap actually, because I didn't know that Little Women wasn't a standalone novel. I had no idea that in reading this, I wasn't going to get the conclusion to the story, and this really bugged me. So I ended up with a fragmented story set during 1 year of the childhoods of the main characters. This made it feel more like a children's book to me. I wasn't very entertained by it. I started reading Little Men, which is the sequel to Little Women, but I really didn't like it. I could not get into it at all, so I decided to leave it there. It's not that they're bad books or anything, it's just, it wasn't for me. It bothers me a bit that I have this unfinished thing on my channel, but at the same time, if my heart's not in it, then I don't think I could do it justice in a video. So, unsurprisingly, I will place this in the Made Me Bored tier. Then we are back to Jane Austen again with Sense and Sensibility from 1811. Another one of my favorites, both as book and as video. Again, I dabbled in a bit of aesthetics, some cottagecore vibes. I had a good structure since it was a long video. I genuinely had a lot of fun making this, both reading the book, writing the script, and then filming it. And we also have some illustrations included here and there. I like that this book focuses more on the love between two sisters and how their understanding of one another changes as they go through their individual heartbreak. I'm sure that sounds really dull. I'm doing a poor job at selling it. But I find it so moving. I would place this in the Made Me Cry tier if it didn't belong in Pemberley tier, because I cry so much when reading this. And finally, we have The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald from 1925. Again, the aesthetics are here. Fun fact, I will not drink sparkling wine in any other glass but these. If I'm home, that is. Although this isn't even wine, it's apple cider, actually, but it worked for the video, which I'm quite happy with in general. I'm sensing a bit of a pattern now that all my earlier videos are a lot more cringe to me compared to these newer ones. It makes sense though, even if it's difficult to watch some of my older content, I'm still very happy to see that I've evolved as a creator. As for The Great Gatsby as a book, I really enjoyed it. It's short, on point most of the time, beautifully written. I would definitely recommend to anyone who's in the mood for some 1920s vibes. And it made me cry, so that's where it will go. Well, that was all the books I have read so far on my channel. Now I want to know what all of you watching think. Have you read any of these books yourself? And how would you rank them in my tier list? Which one made you cry? Which one made you bored? Give me all of the details. And don't forget to like the video below as well. Sorry for nagging. And subscribe to the channel, as it really helps me out. Thank you all so much for watching today, and I hope to see you back next time. Oh, and if you were wondering where Niles was this whole time, I will show you. There he is. Charming, isn't it?